for several months now, since November. The leaders of the West, Russia and indeed the United States have been engaged in an escalating war of words. The political shadowboxing has been over a possible Russian incursion into Ukraine in the aftermath of Russia having amassed almost over 100,000 troops along the borders with eastern Ukraine. In the latest, the United States has called out Moscow's lies, and it has said that its aim is to stop Russia from using misinformation and lies to create a pretext to invade into Ukraine.
Over the past several months, we, but also a number of our allies, have developed a significant amount of credible intelligence about Russian efforts to use a false pretext to justify an invasion of Ukraine. And this evidence mirrors both public reporting and Russian accounts in past conflicts. And I would note a number of your outlets obviously have reporters on the ground, right, who are seeing for themselves what is happening. What is also true is that we've seen Russians' actions over the past few years. If you look just back at past precedent, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed to repeat, but it is important for people to understand contextually what they're capable of and what tactics they've used in the past. And sometimes you do see repetition of that.
All right, now to give us more updates in terms of what is unfolding in terms of this troop build-up by the Russians along the eastern border in Ukraine, we're joined in by WION's executive editor, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, who is presently joining us live from Kiev. Good afternoon to you, Palki. We see that it is extremely cold in the place where you are, but the drumbeats of war are in fact pointing to the fact that tensions are heating up. Now, the Americans over the last few days have been reiterating that they fear that Russia could in fact carry out some kind of a false flag sort of an activity that could create a pretext for war. In Ukraine, what is the mood like out there? Does the Ukrainian leadership believe that the Russians could be carrying out some kind of a false flag operation at this point of time?
A lot of the war hysteria is being drummed up, not so much from Kiev and Ukraine as from the West, Saleh. As in all conflicts, the actual military war begins later. First is a narrative war, and the Americans hope to win it, which is why they've been saying since yesterday that they expect the Russians to use a false pretext to invade Ukraine. And you just heard the soundbite from the U.S. government. So that's the American version of how things are unfolding. Here in Ukraine, as you can see, it's snowing. It's a very cold Saturday, and since morning we have been with the reserve troops of the Ukrainian military, and some of them are taking a break. We saw them carrying out their drills early today, and they're now taking a break, as you can see, for lunch. But earlier today, we spoke to many of them, and we saw what they were doing and how they plan to train further. This is on the outskirts of Kiev. This is a satellite city, and there are still some members of this force who are still training, and we saw gunfire, we saw the drills. Of course, the deployments are going up. In fact, the US and Belgian air forces have increased their presence near the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania as NATO is moving to bolster its alliance and its members against the Russian defense. US reinforcement troops, we understand, have arrived in Germany. And the Polish Prime Minister has announced weapons transfer to Ukraine. So it is building up on both sides of the border. Here in Kiev, people are lining up. I've spoken to many Ukrainians since yesterday, and they all say that they're ready to step up for the defense of their country. A recent poll, in fact, suggested that 31% of the citizens of Ukraine who are not members of the military are keen to join their forces to defend their country.
Absolutely, indeed. So on the one hand, there is preparation that's ongoing on both sides of the border. The Russians have amassed 100,000 troops. The Ukrainians are also getting ready. But on the other hand, you also need to look at the diplomacy that's being played behind the scenes and also in the full public glare of the world's media eye. Yesterday, we saw Xi Jinping meet with Vladimir Putin there. The two leaders reiterated the strong strategic partnership between the two nations. And we also have seen the leaders meeting with the Egyptian, Serbian and also the Kazakh president. This is all being done in a bit to try and shore up the support for the Russians How is this being viewed within Ukraine?
Ukraine is, of course, looking at how all sides are stacking, or all sides are sort of coming together. The support that the Chinese offered to the Russians, I think, is the most significant among all the diplomatic developments that we've seen in the past few days. And more than anyone else, I think the Ukrainians would be hoping that diplomacy delivers, because remember, for the Americans and the Russians, it is a strategic fight. But for the Ukrainians, it's an existential battle. They do not want a war. It's as simple as that. And they hope that diplomacy delivers, which is why if you see the statements from the Ukrainian government, they're not talking about a Russian invasion in so many words. They're talking about preparedness. They also are mindful of the fact that while their NATO allies, while their Western allies are supporting them with weapons and are deploying troops, this is happening on the doorstep of Europe, and no European country has committed to sending troops to Ukraine. So that puts Kiev in a very, very tricky situation. I think their best hope is that all of these talks, we are going to see the French President Emmanuel Macron going to Moscow later this week, and then followed by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. So the best hope on all sides is that it does not really come to a military conflict. At the same time, no one wants to take a chance, which is why you see the kind of drills that we've been seeing. You see the kind of stepping up on both sides of the divide, and in the border villages, we've heard from people who say that at the end of the day, we're all brothers and sisters. We don't need a war. No one needs a war here. But I think Moscow needs a face saver if it is going to step back.
Absolutely, indeed. Moscow does indeed need a step, sort of a face saver. But Palki, just before we let you go, the fact of the matter is Russia has a history of, in fact, staging these kind of troop build-up. It did so last year in the month of April as well. And back in the year 2014, it in fact went on to annex Crimea. At this point of time, Ukraine appears to have a lot more support from the West. You've been talking to a lot of political commentators in Ukraine. How hopeful are they that the West will stand firmly behind Ukraine, especially at a time when there are cracks that seem to be appearing in the alliance that the West is trying to stitch up, led by the United States?
In my conversation with the political commentators and those who have watched closely the military affairs of this region, I do not see a lot of confidence in the role of the West, frankly. They say that we've always been a pawn in this geopolitical chess game, and we are once again being played. So we are ready to defend our country. That's what the soldiers here say. The analysts say that the West can do more. The fact that the Germans not very long ago offered only 5,000 helmets is still fresh in the memory of a lot of Ukrainians, and they say that the West does tend to prioritize its business interests, and it's something that we've been reporting, that Europe is going to be in a very tricky situation. They depend on Russia for gas. So the Ukrainians are mindful of all of those equations very much at play, and they feel that there might be a situation where they're on their own, and the West has made it amply clear that while we are supporting you morally, this is not our war, this is your war, and you need to fight it. And they do understand that the US does not have an appetite for war. The US does not have a president who is going to be, who is seen as a risk taker the way Vladimir Putin is. So yes, all of that goes into the analysis, and they fear that while all of these war drums have been beating, when it actually comes to fighting, they may be doing it on their own with NATO weapons, but by themselves.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, for joining us and getting us all those insights there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.